Well, hello, Nx Conf. I'm super excited to be with you guys. Some amazing talks so far. It's a little intimidating to follow you all, but I love the Nx community, and what an honor to be here to share about really two of some of my favorite topics, being Nx and Cypress. In today's talk, I'm going to give a basic introduction into Cypress. For those of you who live under a rock and maybe not familiar with what Cypress is, also going to share with you some of the new features we've released over the past 6 months here at Cypress. Also want to show you how you can leverage Nx generators in your workspaces to really speed up the development on your teams. And finally, I want to show you how you can use component testing with Cypress to not only improve the testing in your workspaces, but also to speed up and improve the development as well. Like I said, my name is Jordan Powell. I'm a developer experience engineer at Cypress, a Google developer expert, and most importantly, an Nx fanboy. I'm known at Cypress as like the Nx guy, so anytime there is an Nx-related issue on the repo or an Nx of any kind question, I'm the first person that gets pinged at Cypress. So I wear that badge with honor because I love the Nx community. And you can follow me on Twitter at JordanPow88. So what is Cypress? Since I started working at Cypress, I've been asked on occasion, what is Cypress? And I've learned the best way to answer that question is to first ask this question: are you using Nx? Though it may seem a little strange way to answer the question, I've learned that if the answer is yes, then I always tell people it's the -ede thing in your applications. All joking aside, before Cypress, in order to do end-to-end testing, you had to make a series of very difficult technical decisions, like which framework you wanted to use, which assertion library, which type of Selenium wrapper, maybe Protractor, Nightwatch, or WebDriver. And most likely, you needed additional libraries as well. And really maintaining those things and making sure they all play nicely together was a pain. It was very difficult to do. And that developer pain is really what inspired and birthed Cypress. Cypress prides itself on being a test runner built for humans. And what I mean by that is it features time travel debugging, so you can go back in time and you can see the state of your application in time, so you can go back and see, what did my test look like? What did my application look like at this specific state? It's really great for debugging. You get, speaking of debugging, great debuggability. Because Cypress runs in the browser itself, you get access to all the browser tools that you use as a developer every single day, like the network tab, console logs. You know, we like to console log statements sometimes as JavaScript developers, as well as all the other tools you use. You also get real-time reloads, so as you make changes to tests, hit save, Cypress automatically pre-processes that, reruns, and you get a very quick instant feedback loop, which, as a developer, always improves the experience. And this is the one that everyone, at least for myself, is my favorite: automatic waiting. Before Cypress, we would run into these issues with end-to-end testing because front ends don't operate synchronously. They run asynchronously. And so when you visit a page, not everything's just there automatically. There may be animations on the page, and more specifically, there is, in most cases, some type of network request to get some data, right? That data does not happen synchronously. It comes back in some given amount of time that we don't know at the moment. And so what we would do is we would do some type of analysis, and we'd say, okay, this network request, or basically all the requests that it takes to basically load our page and do all the orchestration, takes maybe around 2 seconds. So then we would go in and we'd say, you know what? I'm going to wait for 3,000 milliseconds. I'm going to wait for 3 seconds, and that will give me enough buffer to basically wait for everything to pass, and then I can continue running my assertions and my tests. The problem is that that worked great today, but what happens as our teams are distributed and someone else on your team who lives like Krager, he lives in Kentucky with bad internet, right? What happens when he runs those tests? They don't take 2 seconds anymore. They take maybe 5 seconds. And so now the same exact tests are failing because we're waiting for a very specified amount of time. The other problem with that is, on the flip side, is when you set a specific amount of time, what if that request only took 2 milliseconds? Well, you sat there and waited for literally almost 3 seconds doing nothing, which may seem kind of inconsequential, but those extra waits over and over and over again, multiple times in your test, over dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of times, really, really add up. And as great as NX distributed caching is, we learned about, that can't solve that problem. So that's where Cypress waiting really comes to be powerful, because Cypress, you don't have to do waits. Cypress automatically waits for elements. So when it goes to look for an element, select it from the DOM, and it's not there, Cypress continues to keep trying to wait for it for about 5 seconds. You can specify that to wait longer or less. But the idea is that you don't have to wait for elements. And you can also specify things that you want to wait for. So if you say, I want to wait on this request, you can specify it using an alias. So even though you're waiting, you're assigning what you're waiting for. So you're never wasting time. Because as developers, we care about our time. We get spies, stubs, and clocks, and we get screenshots of any time your test fails. You get screenshots of what your application looked like at that given state. And you also get videos of the entire test suite run as well, and I'll show you that in a minute. Cypress also supports the following browsers: Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Electron, and Brave. And thanks to the hard work of the engineering team at Cypress, we recently announced support for WebKit, which is one of the most outstanding issues, longest standing issues on our repo. So we're excited to, thank you. So all of you who have applications that are very mobile heavy, that rely on Safari, you'll check this out. I think you'll be excited. So Cypress support has been an integral part of the NX ecosystem. For those of us old enough to remember, Cypress has been the default end-to-end testing framework since version 3 of NX. In fact, this was, for me personally, the thing that led me to NX several years back. Let me show you how NX integrates Cypress directly into your workspace. So let's take a blank, brand new NX workspace. There we go. And as you can see here, there's no apps and there's no libs. Let's use the NX console. Ooh, that's really good. To generate a new React application. And this talk is called NX plus Cypress, like peanut butter and jelly. So let's make this app called Sandwich, if I know how to spell it. And as you can see, the NX console is doing a dry run of the output here. So we're going to see it's going to generate a React application by default, as well as a matching Sandwich E2E Cypress application. So this is, for a lot of you, very fundamental if you've been using NX. But for those of you who are new to NX, this is one of the things that's really powerful, and it's just the very entry point of what makes Cypress plus NX a really valuable tool. Now let's show off some of the amazing developer experience features of using Cypress in NX. Earlier this year, Cypress released version 10, which was one of our biggest releases we've ever made. It features a brand new unified UI, as well as support for component testing, which is a new way of testing your applications with Cypress. We worked closely with the NX team to make sure that NX users had no interruptions in their workspaces when updating to the latest version of Cypress. Thankfully to Caleb and the team at NX, they created a generator that handles all the migration to Cypress 10 in one simple command. Let's go ahead and do that to the application we just created. So we are going to run nx g narwhal Cypress and migrate to Cypress 10. And here we will see it's going to not only update our dependencies to Cypress 10, but if we look at our git diff, we now see Cypress, whoa, what is this guy? Okay. We now see Cypress has been updated, but we also have all the other configuration changes that were handled for us by free, thanks to the team at Nx. Now that our workspace has been updated to fully support the latest and greatest from Cypress, with the upgrade, you will now notice the thing I was just talking about, which is component testing. Let's now configure our application to use component testing in our workspace. But first, let's step back and talk about component testing. Cypress Component Testing uses the same API and test runner we've all grown to love in Cypress. Let's highlight some of the features and the differences between end-to-end testing and component testing. What are the differences, right? We used to build applications with the idea of like we would build a page. So we needed a home page and an about page and a products page, a product details page, so forth. And we still do that, but with the sort of adoption of front-end frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, and others that take a very component-centric emphasis on development, we begin to shift the way we not only build our applications, but we need to think also how should we test our applications. So instead of thinking of our applications like this, we now think of our applications more like this. Instead of one massive page, we think of it as a page that is composed of maybe dozens, if not hundreds of components that are maybe just specific to this page, or it's maybe reused in other parts of your application or other applications. This chart shows some of the differences between end-to-end testing and component testing. The main thing I want to focus on is this last one, which is the initialization command. With end-to-end testing, we have this idea of a page, and so you want to load a route or a URL. So the first thing we do when we write an end-to-end test is we need to visit some URL. And then once we've basically loaded the page, we then begin to write tests to assert the various things that we care about. With component testing, it's different though, because we don't have this concept of routing. You're basically telling it, I only want to mount this component to the DOM and any of its child things, right? So I just want to highlight that we're not routing, we're not visiting with Cypress, we're mounting a component. But everything else after that is the exact same. It's the same API, it's all the same test runner, and everything else that you've grown to love. But why component testing? Like, why should I care about it? Does it replace unit testing? Does it replace end-to-end testing? What problem does it actually solve? And it does not replace unit testing, and it does not replace end-to-end testing. First and foremost, we didn't build it to do those things. It was created to be a better alternative to how we test our components, because unit tests with tools like Jest or Karma are great, but they don't run in the browser, and they don't provide assurance they will work the way our users actually interact with them. And end-to-end tests are often too broad to test the narrow scope of an isolated component. That's where component tests really shine. In fact, component testing, in my experience, is most useful during the actual building phase of your components. I know I'm not the biggest advocate for test-driven development. I think it has its place. But this is where I feel like component testing is most valuable, and it really kind of embraces test-driven development. I'll show you about this more in a little bit, but it allows you to get this sort of instant feedback on the styles, behaviors of your components directly in the browser. This quick feedback loop is really what boosts your productivity as a developer. I'll tell a story. I've had several jobs where I would work on basically like a sales flow, and I'd have these long forms, and I have to fill out a series of questions, and then once I answered those questions, I'd have to go to another route that answered a series of questions. And I would always feel like I would get tasked with solving problems on like the fourth step of the series, right? And so it was always very difficult, not difficult, but time-consuming to work on those things, because I would either have to, if they were stateful, I would always have to either manually as a developer fill out these things in my browser over and over and over again to actually get to the fourth page of the thing that I actually cared about. So what I'd often do is create end-to-end tests that would do this work for me, so I could then get to the thing that I care about, and that's where end-to-end tests really shine. But the one thing about component testing is that if I'm building in a component, that's really the thing I care about. I don't care about where it lies in my application. I don't care about all the other things around it. And if you're like me and get distracted by a lot of things, being able to just see one component like in your test runner can be wildly valuable and help you focus. Let's use another Nx generator to configure component testing for a sandwich application using the Cypress component configuration. Let's use the Nx generator for Narwhal React, and we're going to create Cypress component configuration. Now, once we click this, Nx is going to prompt us with a series of questions. First being, where do we want to install component testing? Now, we may be tempted to say, hey, Cypress goes in the end-to-end application, right? Well, it's different with component testing because we're testing components, and with end-to-end testing, we don't have any concept of our framework, our components, or anything like that. Where component testing, we're testing our components directly. And so we want those tests, like we do unit tests, to live next to the components themselves. So we'll click the sandwich application. Next, Nx will prompt us if we want to automatically generate tests for components declared in this project. This is a great tool because it will, Nx will traverse that application, look for all the components, and automatically generate a file and mount, basically give you all the starting code that you need to mount your component. So the default is false, but I'm going to go ahead and click true so you can see this in action. And here's Nx went ahead and created some more files. So now if we go to our apps folder and we look at our sandwich app, we now see we have a Cypress installation. We also have a Cypress config, which uses Nx component testing presets. And we also see in our components, we also have these component tests. All this for free, just using one Nx generator. Wrong way, there we go. I also want to point out one more Nx generator. This one is one that you can use to, if you maybe later created a component after you ran this test, or the previous generator, and you want to generate a new component test for a component already you just created, or maybe you selected no and you manually wanted to go in and do this. So let's use this generator to do the same thing. So let's go ahead and delete this, not the app component. We don't want to do that. Let's say delete this app component test. Now let's go here, and let's use Nx generate Narwhal React, and we're going to go with component test, and using the project flag to specify the sandwich application, and we're going to give it a component path to the name of the component that we want to reference in our component test. That went ahead and created that, and as you can see now, we now have this app component test right back in place. Let's go ahead and run our component test. You can kind of see what it runs, what it looks like. Let's use the component test. Let's see. Nx run sandwich component test. And I'm going to use the watch flag here so that so we can open it up in Cypress and you guys can see it in action. That's where the real magic is, in my opinion. Oops. Wrong screen. Over here. There we go. So here's Cypress. Cypress is our Nx launched component testing. Now we can pick our browser. I'll use Electron. Opened up in the wrong tab again. Oops. And so here we go. We see now all of our components in our application now have tests for them. And if you go here, we can now see, not only can you see the components in isolation, but you can also interact with them. So you can see I want a crunchy peanut butter. I'll use grape. And there, my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If you're like me, though, if you're making a peanut butter jelly sandwich, if you're going to go that far, I'm going to put extra of both. Getting lost in tabs here. There we go. So I'm going to now demo. I want to show some of the implementations of the component test directly so you can get a little bit higher level of what these look like. Let's go to our jelly component to see what we're talking about. So this application, like we mentioned earlier, is using React. It's a pretty simple app. And basically, there's a prop for the flavor of jelly that we want it to render. And basically, it just adds some CSS styling to that div to make it look either grape or jelly. And we also have a thickness flag, which, again, I showed you, displays whether it's thick or not. So in this case, let's go to our jelly component test. And that generator that we ran earlier just basically mounts the component so we can see it in action. But we're not really running any assertions or anything additional here. So let me go ahead and let's create a test, and let's pass in the grape prop. And as you can see with Cypress, the mount command, we're just passing in the JSX that we would normally just use in our React components, and it then renders exactly like that in our component test. And here I'm just getting that jelly component, and I'm just making sure it has the correct styles. And if I go to my jelly component, you'll now see we have two tests, and that's running like that. We then we have fans for grape jelly, but we probably have some people that prefer strawberry. So let's go ahead and do the same thing with strawberry. And then we also want to support those who like extra grape jelly on their sandwiches. Let's go ahead and press save, and you will see this once again. So let's go look at this is a pretty trivial example, but let me look at our menu item. This is a pretty simple test again, and basically it's just like a checkbox. So let's create a test that validates menu checkbox. Should work, let's see. So here we have this test, and we have this checkbox, right? Uh-oh, it's mad at me. Menu. I am in the wrong test. No wonder it's not working. Here, menu checkbox. Live demos, right? So here we go. If I go to my menu checkbox, I now have a second test. And here you can see I passed a label of test to it, and it's there. Let's go ahead, go back to it. Let's pass something that says, hello, Nx conf. And now it's going to now pass it there, but now my test is failing because I was asserting that it had a different label. Finally, let's talk about how we do handle like outputs or props that are functions. Here, you can pass a Cypress spy into a prop that's basically like a callback function, and you can give it an alias of, we'll use value change spy. Later, you can reference these using the Cypress get command, and using the @ syntax with value changes, you can then reference these later. And so now, this test is still failing because it was before, and now it moves on and runs this test. And there we go. Here are the links to my slides and the repo. You can see this example. And thank you guys for having me.